Hello and welcome to Project Cirrus, where earlier today Fraser attempted to break a number of wingsuit world records. The original plan was to bring to you a Facebook Live that documented all of the events for this morning and what transpired over the ensuing hours. As is always the case with these types of events, it wasn't ever going to be a true live broadcast. For example, we had to put point of view cameras over the plane, and a plane looking to get up to 37,500 feet presents a degree of difficulty in streaming live footage back. Shortly after 7 o'clock this morning, it became apparent that things really weren't going in our favour today. So we're going to take you through the events as they unfolded. The good news, I should say, is Fraser is safe and sound, all is well. But this is what happened earlier today. It was an early start for Fraser this morning. About 3:30, he left the hotel, made the short journey across to Skydance skydiving here in Davis, California. He met up with his longtime mentor and jump master, Tad Smith. Around about 5:15 a.m. this morning, he went into what's called pre-breathing, where he's breathing pure oxygen, sat on the plane, and he was doing that for about approximately an hour before the plane set off to depart. And this is where our first challenge was encountered, as the first attempt at takeoff was actually aborted. As is the case with all of these events, safety is paramount. And one of the reasons Fraser put together the team he has is to make sure he had the right experts in the plane flying to the right support experts, making sure his equipment, his helmet, his flight suit, the oxygen units that he was using. He wanted to have the very best minds supporting his attempts to break the world records. As you'll see now from the following pictures, our pilot this morning, he wasn't happy with the first takeoff, so he brought the plane back. We're going to go to James Hayhurst, who's actually the official adjudicator here today, but he's a veteran pilot of some 40 years, having flown both military and commercial planes. He explained what possibly happened this morning.
It's always speculation when you're on the ground, imagining or trying to guess what happened inside the aircraft. But as an aircraft commander, my guess is the pilot, he apparently reported there was unusual vibration on takeoff, a really resonating landing gear. So he chose to stop the aircraft, come back in, and he asked us to check the tire pressure and inspect the landing gear. And everything was fine. The pressures were normal, the landing gear looked normal. If I had to guess, the aircraft was lightly loaded today. So the weight on the wheels was light. And when you have landing gear that are actually not fully impressed into the ground, like when you have a heavy normal takeoff, it's more likely that's the moment when landing gear are going to vibrate. And that may have been what happened.
So they successfully took off at the second attempt, and they embarked on their hour-long ascent up to their target altitude. We're going to bring you some comments that we had from the owner here, Ray Farrell, who's a veteran pilot, and he's going to talk us through the challenges of getting these single-engine planes up to our target altitude of 37,500 feet.
The higher you go with these type of airplanes, the rarefied air, the thinner the air gets. The wing is not designed to be there very well. So you have basically a stall speed line and a climb speed line. And at some point where the air gets thin enough, you run into a point. And that's what we call the knife edge. And so you've got to fly very coordinated on the knife edge. If you go uncoordinated at all, the airplane starts to slip out of the sky and you start to lose altitude. So we're just flying airplanes to the maximum lift capacity that the wing has. When we're going as high as we're going to try to go now, which is, we have approval to go up as high as 38,000 feet. The highest we've ever made it is like 37,400 feet. So we have enough fuel to get us there and back in a 30-minute reserve.
So part of the challenge that the pilot would find in flying on the knife edge, as Ray calls it, is the temperatures today. It's just so hot that it creates a vacuum at altitude. So even getting the plane up to 37,000 feet, and it was always going to be a challenge. As we now know, they only reached about 33,000 feet, and they knew at that point it was going to be the maximum altitude for the aeroplane today. I'm going to bring you some pictures of Fraser exiting the plane. where uncharacteristically, it's not Fraser's smoothest exit. Looked rather dramatic, but within about 1,500 feet, he was into his natural flying position. And you can see now point of view footage of him settling into his flight, picked his target line, and he's relaxed into his wingsuit flight. One of the interesting challenges for wingsuit pilots looking to fly at the altitude we're seeing Fraser at right now is their O2 systems. We caught up earlier with Tad Smith, who's Fraser's jump master, and he's regarded as the industry expert for O2. He's going to talk to you about the challenges faced with using O2 systems.
The challenges that you would add to the wingsuit flight by adding oxygen are adding a mask on your face, adding the hoses, adding the bottles, and all of that other stuff, which is going to make you a little bit asymmetrical in flight. Plus just the requirement for having oxygen. If he loses oxygen, it's like one of those things about fish don't notice the water. And that if he's fine with the oxygen system, it's going to seem like a totally normal flight. If there's a malfunction of the oxygen system, it can be very bad very fast, because the time of useful consciousness at 37,000 feet is going to be less than a minute. So if he has a 9-minute flight and his oxygen system fails at high altitude, he could become hypoxic. So that's one of the major challenges, is just to make sure that we have the systems functional. And if he does become hypoxic, that could affect his flying. It could lead all the way to the point of unconsciousness if it got bad enough.
One of the interesting questions we've been asked this week is, how experienced do you have to be to take on the challenges that Fraser has? Well, in Fraser's case, he's been flying wingsuits for well over 10 years. And in fact, he's completed more than 2,500 jumps. He's meticulous with his planning, he surrounds himself by a team of experts, and he absolutely doesn't take any unnecessary risks. Now, it's about this point in his flight that Fraser was evaluating all of the conditions, the time of his flight, the altitude he was at, and assessing the wind conditions. And he very quickly knew that the weather was against him this morning. He wasn't going to be able to set any of the world records he had set out to achieve. So rather than going chasing overly ambitious goals, he made the smart decision to get himself back down safely. We're going to talk to Fraser now. He's going to take you through his flight and the decisions that he made.
Got to altitude, we were targeting 37,000 feet. We left half an hour later because of the delays due to engineering, and we effectively only got 33,000 feet, so the heat has killed us. So at that point, it was always going to be very, very tough to get any records, which is really frustrating. But the weather's the one thing, as I said all along, we can't control. So I got out, flew the suit, and unfortunately, no records I knew pretty much straight away because we had no winds. There was no upper winds, and for the distance and speed records, it was always critical that we got those winds. So the weather's the one thing we can never control. Everything else has gone well, the oxygen systems all work perfectly. I landed safely, the crash chase team found me, recovered, I'm here, all safe and sound. So now we look at Canada. Canada's having the reverse issue at the moment. The weather there is lots of cloud and rain. So what we could have done is cooler weather here and sunny weather up in Canada. But the weather is the one thing none of us can control.
So it's not been the ending to the day that we would have hoped, but the most important thing is Fraser is down safe and the planning is already underway for London, Ontario, where in a little over a week's time, hopefully Fraser will have another shot at the altitude world record. Planning's already underway, but for now, thanks very much. That's Project Cirrus, Davis, California, wrapped.